Italy's flying corpse that refused to die. The Alitalia disaster. When most airlines die, they crash spectacularly and disappear into aviation history. But Alitalia was different. For 74 years, Italy's national carrier stumbled from crisis to crisis like a zombie airline, burning through 10 billion euros in government bailouts while somehow refusing to stay dead. Founded in 1946 as the pride of post-war Italy, Alitalia became a case study in how politics, national pride, and sheer stubbornness can keep a fundamentally broken business shambling forward long past its expiration date. This is the story of an airline that should have died a dozen times over, yet somehow kept flying until 2021, when it was finally put out of its misery and replaced by a suspiciously similar successor called ITA Airways. The seeds of Alitalia's dysfunction were planted at its very creation. Born from the merger of two smaller Italian airlines in September 1946, Alitalia was conceived as more than just a business. It was a symbol of Italy's post-war recovery and national prestige. The Italian government owned 60% of the company from day one, with British European Airways holding the remaining 40%. This public-private partnership seemed promising initially, as Alitalia expanded rapidly throughout the 1950s and 1960s, becoming the first European airline to operate the Sud Aviation Caravelle jet and establishing routes across Europe, Africa, and eventually the Americas. By the 1970s, Alitalia was carrying over 10 million passengers annually and had grown into one of Europe's major carriers. But beneath this success lurked a fatal flaw. The airline was treated as a jobs program and political tool rather than a profit-driven enterprise. The rot began to show in the 1980s, when deregulation hit European aviation like a sledgehammer. While nimble competitors adapted to the new reality of price competition and efficiency demands, Alitalia remained trapped in the old world of government protection and inefficient operations. The airline employed roughly 22,000 people by the late 1980s, nearly double what similar-sized carriers needed to operate effectively. Union contracts were so generous they bordered on the absurd, with pilots earning among the highest salaries in Europe while working fewer hours than their competitors. Meanwhile, political interference meant that routes were chosen based on regional politics rather than profitability, leading to a network that served Italian politicians better than Italian passengers or shareholders. The 1990s marked the beginning of Alitalia's death spiral, though nobody knew it would take 3 decades to complete. The airline's first major crisis hit in 1996, when accumulated losses forced the government to inject 2.75 billion euros just to keep the planes in the air. This bailout came with promises of privatization and restructuring that would make Alitalia competitive, but these reforms were largely cosmetic. The real problem wasn't just money. It was a corporate culture that viewed profit as optional and efficiency as somehow un-Italian. When the government finally sold its stake to a private consortium in 2009, the airline was already technically bankrupt, surviving only through creative accounting and government guarantees. The new owners, led by a group of Italian entrepreneurs, promised to turn things around within 3 years. Instead, they managed to lose another billion euros in record time. What made Alitalia's decline so spectacular was its sheer persistence in the face of mathematical impossibility. Between 2000 and 2017, the airline posted exactly one profitable year, a single bright spot in an ocean of red ink that would have killed any normal business 10 times over. During this period, Alitalia burned through management teams like jet fuel, cycling through 18 different CEOs who each arrived promising transformation and departed leaving the company worse than they found it. The airline's cost structure was so bloated that it needed to charge passengers roughly 30% more than competitors just to break even, which naturally drove customers away to cheaper alternatives like Ryanair and EasyJet. By 2017, Alitalia's domestic market share had collapsed to just 23% despite being the national carrier, while its international routes were hemorrhaging money to more efficient competitors. The final act of this corporate tragedy began in 2017 when Alitalia entered what would become its 4th and final bankruptcy. The immediate trigger was a failed restructuring vote by the airline's unions, who rejected a rescue plan that would have cut jobs and reduced wages. apparently preferring unemployment to employment at market rates. This vote effectively signed the airline's death warrant, though it would take another 4 years for the patient to finally expire. The Italian government, seemingly unable to learn from decades of failure, pumped another €1 billion into the zombie carrier to keep it operating while searching for a buyer. Potential suitors, including Lufthansa, Delta, and even budget carrier Wizz Air, took a look at Alitalia's books and ran screaming in the opposite direction. The airline had become literally unbuyable. Its debts exceeded its assets by such a massive margin that acquiring it would have been financial suicide. What's truly remarkable about Alitalia's death spiral is how predictable it became. Every few years, the same script played out. Mounting losses led to crisis talks, which led to government intervention, which led to promises of reform, which led to temporary stabilization, which led inevitably to mounting losses again. The airline's route network told the story of this decline in painful detail. Alitalia abandoned profitable long-haul routes to destinations like Bangkok, Buenos Aires, and Tokyo because it couldn't compete with more efficient carriers, while maintaining money-losing domestic flights for political reasons. The carrier's hub at Rome's Fiumicino Airport became a monument to missed opportunities, with Alitalia holding valuable slots it couldn't profitably use while blocking competitors who could have made them productive. The mathematics of Alitalia's failure are staggering. Over its 75-year lifespan, the airline received approximately €10 billion in various forms of government support, enough money to buy 4 brand-new Airbus A380 Super Jumbos every single year for 2 decades. This figure doesn't include tax breaks, loan guarantees, and other hidden subsidies that would push the real cost even higher. To put this in perspective, €10 billion could have provided every resident of Rome with roughly €4,000 in cash, or funded Italy's entire space program for 40 years. Instead, this money vanished into an airline that employed fewer people in its final years than a large shopping mall, while providing service quality that consistently ranked among Europe's worst. The European Union finally forced Italy to face reality in 2021 when Brussels ruled that further state aid to Alitalia would violate competition laws. Faced with the choice between following EU regulations and losing their national carrier, Italian politicians chose a third option that perfectly captured the airline's entire history. They created a new airline called ITA Airways that looked suspiciously similar to the old one. This successor inherited many of Alitalia's assets, including its valuable Rome hub and some of its routes, while conveniently leaving behind most of the debts and troublesome union contracts. ITA launched in October 2021 with about half of Alitalia's former workforce and a business plan promising profitability within a few years, the same promise that had been made countless times before. The Alitalia story offers profound lessons about the dangers of mixing national pride with business logic. For 3/4 of a century, Italian governments of every political stripe treated the airline as too important to fail, pouring taxpayer money into a fundamentally broken enterprise while preventing the market forces that might have fixed it or killed it mercifully. The result was a slow-motion corporate disaster that destroyed billions in value while providing increasingly poor service to the passengers it was supposed to serve. Alitalia's zombie existence prevented more efficient competitors from fully entering the Italian market, ultimately harming consumers and the broader economy. In the end, Italy's national carrier became a perfect metaphor for the country's broader economic challenges. Trapped between a glorious past and an uncertain future, burning money while going nowhere fast. The airline that once symbolized Italian style and sophistication died as it had lived for decades, broke, dysfunctional, and utterly dependent on government life support that should have been unplugged years earlier.